Welcome to the Love After Lies podcast, where we help couples who have been devastated by infidelity find hope and healing for their relationship. We're your hosts, Josh and Avonlea Roy.
We've walked the painful road of infidelity in our own marriage, and we're going to show you how we overcame the impossible so that you can have more love, freedom, connection, intimacy, and happiness in your marriage.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Love After Lies podcast. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus, sabbatical, you might say, for the last 4.5 months. Not really on purpose. We kind of got derailed. We recorded this episode that we are recording right now, probably the end of August or beginning of September. But unfortunately, the software that we were using at that time decided to crash. And so that episode did not turn out. And I think the day after that, Josh left for a pretty long business trip. Where did you go and how long were you gone?
I was in Italy and Croatia for 21 days for work.
Everyone's like, how do I get that job? So Josh left, which obviously didn't make it conducive to recording at that time. I was able to go join him. I got to spend 10 days over there in Italy and Croatia. We got to spend some time in Florence and Tuscany and Rome, and then flew over to Zagreb, Croatia. So that was fun. And then when he got back, actually you flew straight to Houston from Europe for our follow-up polygraph, which we're trying to tell the story in chronological order, so we'll get to that. But yeah, we had a follow-up visit in October, and then, gosh, we just got swept away by the holidays and really just derailed, like I said. So we haven't been recording. However, back in December, we were featured on the Pure Desire podcast. We did an interview with them way back in, I think May of 2025. And so we were surprised when we did that interview and they said, okay, it's coming out in December. It's kind of a long time, but we were thrilled to be featured on their podcast. And that did bring an influx of new listeners to our show. And so we've had a lot of new listeners. And I just want to give a shout out to a listener from Australia who has been messaging us to ask us for this next episode. So that's all really fun and exciting. Thanks again to Pure Desire for having us on. So here we go, continuing.
I was just going to say, it's not the only reason why it's taken this episode so long to come out too. We've been really thinking and mulling over the information that we're going to talk about here and how to do it in the best way possible.
Yeah. And we did try. We had one recorded, but
yeah, that's true.
Maybe it didn't turn out right for a reason.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So as Josh said, we are trying to really thoughtfully share this because I don't know, there's so much we still don't know. And so we're really encouraging you listeners, as you hear our story, to research this out for yourself, to pray about it, to do your own homework. And we're just telling our story as truthfully as possible. So as we jump into that, I want to give a little bit of background info, context for kind of the people that we are. So first and foremost, Josh and I are children of the 80s and 90s. We grew up with the war on drugs. And I don't know about you, Josh, but I was terrified. Everything about it, smoking, any kind of drugs. I was so scared from the war on drugs. And in addition to that, as you guys might recall from earlier episodes, I grew up in the LDS church. Most people around the world who aren't familiar with that will know that as the Mormon church. So growing up in the LDS church, they have something called the Word of Wisdom. And that's kind of like a health code for living, so to speak. And there's things that you are supposed to do, like limiting meat and eating lots of fruits and vegetables and healthy grains. But there's also things that you don't do, like no coffee, no tea, no alcohol, no drugs, etc. And growing up LDS Mormon, I did not have any problem with the Word of Wisdom. That just wasn't my temptation in life. I had a pretty easy time following that. And then in my early 20s, I was introduced to alternative medicine or natural wellness. I was struggling with a health condition, and traditional Western medicine doctors weren't really doing a good job of helping me figure it out. And so I turned to diet, nutrition, herbs, essential oils. And this was like the early 2000s, like 2001, 2002. And back then, people weren't as widely exploring that. I think people are a lot more informed now. We definitely had like the essential oil craze about 10 years ago and
CBD.
Yeah, that's all like, and I just see a lot more of it. I think people are more aware of diet triggers, especially with awareness of autoimmune conditions and celiac disease, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So the reason why I'm sharing this kind of background information and context, and I think, Josh, maybe you should chime in here a little bit about your background and how you grew up. But I would say for myself, I'm generally pretty health conscious because of my background and upbringing. I'm not someone who's ever done drugs recreationally, nor do I go to the doctor looking for a pill to solve my every problem. I'm very open-minded when it comes to using food as a healing power in our lives. Does that make sense? How about you, Josh?
I grew up in non-denominational type household. And so, drugs and things like that were, heavily discouraged. Obviously, I probably wasn't afraid. I smoked weed a little bit in high school, not too long though, because I was really more concerned with just athletics and physical performance and things like that. So I quickly realized that marijuana was not going to help that. But other than that, it was, smoking or any other kind of drugs was definitely out of the question.
And you also grew up, I think your mom was pretty nutritionally.
Very much so, yeah.
So you had a lot of that influence in your life. Like you didn't grow up eating mac and cheese.
We eating mac and cheese, drinking any sodas or we were definitely very health conscious.
Yeah. So you and I both, and maybe this is one of the things that, we realized we were compatible when we met and we're dating, we're both really pretty health conscious people. So just kind of wanted to share that background context of like who Josh and I are as we head into this discussion. So I'm going to rewind again a little bit prior to D-Day, a couple years prior to that. I was introduced to breath work for the first time. And the way that, I don't know if anybody listening to this podcast is familiar with it, but it's a form of breathing that is kind of like hyperventilating, and it can produce an altered state of consciousness just simply by the way that you breathe. And as I was going to this first breathwork session hosted by a friend of mine who had become certified, she was trying to explain what this non-ordinary state of consciousness would be like. And she said, some people compare it to the effect of plant medicine. And being a little formerly Mormon girl from Utah, I was like, what's plant medicine? And my brain automatically went to, natural wellness. I'm all for it. Like I grew up taking St. John's wort and garlic pills and echinacea, plant medicine. And, they kind of gave me this cute little look and they were like, well, kind of like magic mushrooms. And I was like, oh, because immediately my brain jumps to, well, that's drugs, right? And so I was like, but I had never really made the connection before that these are also plants. And so that was kind of an interesting first introduction to hearing it referred to that way. And shortly after that, there was a podcast that I was listening to, a fitness influencer, and she happened to post an episode about breath work. And I was like, oh, cool. I just learned about breath work. I just did it. And so I'm listening to this podcast about breath work. And Josh and I were listening to it together. And lo and behold, they start talking about plant medicine and this really exciting research and studies that have been done in treating PTSD, depression, addictions. And these two people on this podcast, I'll link it in the notes so you guys can check it out for yourselves if you're interested. But they were talking about how they had gone to this retreat together and just the profound experience they had had. So Josh and I listened to this podcast together. I'm thinking this is 2021. Mm-hmm. And we were like, that sounds cool. We should try it someday. But
really not knowing what we were
We had no
into.
idea. We had just listened to this one podcast and we're like, that sounds cool. And so, but it was got put on the back burner. I think we looked it up and we were like, oh, it's really expensive. And it still is. And so we were like, well, we don't have a really pressing need to go, but hey, we know it's out there. So then fast forward to D-Day. July 2023. And if you guys will remember from previous episodes, like my brain was like, how far on this planet can I get away from Josh? I just was like, I need to be the farthest geographical point. I'm like India, Indonesia. I'm like, and I had just gotten laid off from my job. And so I was like, well, I have money coming in. And so I'm just going to go live in another country. I was kind of thinking extreme thoughts. And then I like started really seriously thinking about it. Where would I go? And all of a sudden, this retreat in Costa Rica popped into my head. And I was like, I remembered this podcast we had listened to and that they were treating trauma and, PTSD at this retreat. And so I was like, that's where I'm going. And I called up Josh and I was like, I'm either going with you or without you. And, there was like, I was tempted to go this week.
I don't think you said with you or without you. You were like, I'm going here. And I was like...
That's what I said. I'm going with or without you.
Well, it might be helpful for me too.
So I think I said, I called you up and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go do this. And I said, I didn't want to make a decision about getting divorced until I had gone to this retreat. And I said, I'm going to go, and do you want to come with me? And I remember you saying, I love that idea. That was like the words out of your mouth was, I love that idea. I was like, okay. So we called them up and we booked our trip. And for whatever reason, we had scheduled it about 4 months out, which is, hindsight was a good thing because I was in active trauma at the time. And I don't know that it would have been as effective for me to go into this space without having taken some time to actually like process what I was going through. So we scheduled our trip for the end of November 2023. And in the meantime, we were separated and kind of working through things remotely. We had been fully separated. So yeah, but all the time in the back of our minds, knowing that this was coming up. And you started to get nervous. I
did. Well, I think we started watching the videos, becoming a little bit more aware of what we were getting into. And it, for whatever reason, we didn't pick up on that. This was classified or is a hallucinogenic, right? And I don't know how we missed that, but yeah. So that was definitely a kind of a red flag or a warning for, especially growing up. Christian, non-denominational especially.
Right. And war on drugs, like I'm saying, drugs, like anything hallucinogenic or psychedelic, that's a very scary term for like that I grew up with anyway. So yeah, that was surprising as we started doing the research and realizing that it was,
psychedelic. It's not necessarily hallucinogenic for everyone, right? People don't.
Yeah, you don't necessarily hallucinate. No. Yeah. Psychedelic just means it's producing an altered state of consciousness or a non-ordinary state of consciousness. So you started getting nervous. And so then I was like, well, shoot, what are we doing? And so I started doing a lot of research, and you can go in and go online and there's tons of research articles out there. But I don't know, everything that I read just made me feel actually more excited about going and what we were going to get into. So do we want to share where we went?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we had heard of the retreat that we heard about on this podcast was Rhythmia in Costa Rica. And so that's where we went. And to just kind of go back to where we were on our previous episodes, we talked about our period of separation. We were separated for most of July, August, September, October. We reintegrated at the beginning of November. And I think I talked about that on a previous episode, and it was really hard. The struggle was real for me those first few days and weeks being back in our home together in Oregon. I was still really depressed and just trying to figure out how we were going to move forward and build a new marriage after what we had been through. So the last week of November, I think the day after Thanksgiving, we hopped on a plane and we flew to Costa Rica and got to Rhythmia.
We want to probably tell them why we chose to go
that's
to
a good
Rhythmia.
reason. Yeah.
It's the only medically licensed facility in the world that administers ayahuasca. And
so they have doctors on site,
tons of medical staff. It's classified as a medical facility.
It's as a designated hospital.
It also comes with classes, right? There's classes you go to attend all day long. It's not just your center where you're going and taking ayahuasca and for psychedelics. It's not like a bunch of druggies are showing up there at all. It's very much therapy focused. And so that's why. And there's other facilities that, not that we have looked a lot into this elsewhere, but there are other places you can go to do this. And it's usually therapy focused, but this was safe. This was very controlled. Had a lot of controls around it and precautions and stuff like that. So we felt it was the safest and most effective.
And that's a really good point, because I guess you're right. When I started doing the research, there were tons of promising scientific articles. But the scary things that I ran into were people who had gone off into the jungle and done this in the wrong place with the wrong people, and bad things happened. People have been exploited and abused. And so as we're heading into telling this story, I think this is partially why we're so reluctant, and we want to make sure we share it the right way, because there is really a dark side to this industry and plant medicine in general, people using it in the wrong way with the wrong people, with people with bad intentions. And so I think that it certainly behooves us to be careful about how we're sharing and making sure, again, like this is why we're telling the story, because we don't want someone to hear us and go, oh, well, they did ayahuasca, and then you just go off and do ayahuasca somewhere without doing your research, and something bad happens.
Yeah. And a lot of that research that we did, we were listening to podcasts about it, how it rewires our brains. And there's a lot of promising research on the effects of various types of plant medicine and other things. So it's not only plant medicine. So the other thing I was going to say about this is it's not like Avonlea mentioned that other people go to into the jungle and they're exposed. It's not that you lose consciousness, that you're all together at all. You can be very present with what's going on. It's more like falling in and out of dreams. So if you're sleeping at night and you go into a deep dream state, and you might wake up for whatever reason and have to go to the bathroom. The same thing with ayahuasca. You get up, go to the bathroom. Nothing's turning into a bunch of snakes or dragons. The grass doesn't start, crawling or anything like that. You're kind of in a zone, but you can go to the bathroom, you can think on your own and stuff like that. You're not completely vulnerable, but it's when you go back to the bed and you kind of you go back to sleep, we'll call it. You start
it's a dreamlike state.
It's dreamlike state.
Yeah.
It's enhanced dreamlike state, I would say, but it has this very therapeutic component to it for some reason.
So let's dig into that. I really would like to share why it ended up being so beneficial for me. So first and foremost, we loved the setting. Like Costa Rica was, how can you go wrong? It's beautiful. The retreat, like we mentioned, is a very safe facility. It's also very beautiful. They're providing us with great food. We don't have to worry about it. And there's yoga and massages and hydrocolonic cleanses. Like it's really a great experience where you feel like you can relax, feel safe. So I would say it was probably this, and we did ceremony for 4 nights. I only was able to do 3. I couldn't do the final night. We'll get to that. But it was the second night where I had a real breakthrough. And in my altered state of consciousness, one of the questions that we had been asked, there's kind of, like Josh said, there's a program. And so you're supposed to kind of be doing this self-exploration of show me who I have become, merge me back with my soul at all costs, and heal my heart. And when they say merge me back with my soul, it's like, at what point did you dissociate from yourself as a child? They say it's usually a trauma that happens between the age of 0 and 7. And
this is all grounded in psychology and therapy too. This isn't
like
just
EMDR,
something they came up with.
Yeah, EMDR will take you to the same thing, like what happened between the ages of 0 and 7. So I had this meditation kind of moment on a previous night where they had asked us to picture our heart and think of something we were grateful for and blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't do it. I was like really stuck and I couldn't find anything I was grateful for. And when they said, imagine your heart, I just saw myself lying on the floor with a sword through my heart. Like I was just pinned to the ground by this sword. of betrayal. So on this night of plant medicine, as the medicine started to take effect, I had that vision come to me again, this me lying on the ground with a sword through my heart. And they encourage you, if you have an image, a mental picture come up, then you ask yourself, how does it make me feel? And of course, my answer to this was, I feel betrayed. And then you're supposed to ask yourself, do I feel this way in my everyday life? And I was like, well, yeah, duh. I'm currently dealing with this. And then the question is, when was the first time you felt that way? Because it's intended to take you back to this early childhood feeling. And I was like, when was the first time I felt this way? Like 2 months ago. Like I've never felt this way before in my life. And I was like really angry about it. And then this little voice in my head, it's like my own mind, pulling this information up. It's not like a spirit appeared to me, but I heard this little whisper in my own mind say, when was the first time you betrayed yourself? And I was like, whoa. And I just saw this video of my life rewinding. And I saw time after time after time that I'd been untrue to myself, untrue to God, and untrue to others, actually. And it took me all the way back to the age of 5 to this first instance of my life where I can remember I really felt like I had betrayed myself by something I had done. And I had a pretty big breakdown over that, but also just looking at this stack of betrayals in my own life that were caused by myself, in a way, it made me realize that I'm no better than anyone else and that I'm a sinner in need of a savior just as much as Josh is, just as much as the infidelity partner, maybe, because I've been carrying a lot of anger and hatred and resentment towards the acting out partner. And it was kind of this great equalizer in a sense. Like it showed me my own pride. And that was probably the biggest revelation for me of this experience, is like the way that the medicine works and the way it kind of fires all these new connections in your brain. I just saw myself for who I truly am. And I saw my pride. And that is like probably my fatal flaw, my biggest sin, so to speak, in my life. And so at the end of the night, and you don't just get left there. You don't just get left in this like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person. Like as soon as you make that connection, the healing starts to happen. As soon as you get to that place of like, okay, I acknowledge this trauma, this incident, whatever that happens, things start to like get woven back together in this beautiful way. And I was able to forgive myself and, in my mind's eye, give myself the love and nurturing and affection that I needed as a child, forgive myself. And that allowed me to forgive Josh, to forgive the acting out partner. And it was like, done and kind of miraculous. This arrhythmia, they say, did you get your miracle? They make this whole big deal about, everyone comes for a miracle. And it was a miracle of forgiveness. And it was like the second night that we were there. So I had another powerful night on night 3. And then on night 4, I wasn't able to do the ceremony because the head over that ceremony, his Colombian tribe, his lineage, they don't allow women who are menstruating to participate in the ceremonies. And so I was not able to participate that night. But I mean, I felt the lasting effects of this visit to Rhythmia. Like to this day, like I would say the forgiveness has been complete, and I've never gone back to a place of not feeling healed and forgiven, or forgiving, and I'm forgiven actually. And so that was kind of a miraculous step in our healing as a marriage. What are your thoughts, Josh? I just talked for kind of a long time.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, it was miraculous and quick. Yeah, It was, Tuesday night already. You work really well with therapy in general. I think that should be noted. You've done a lot of therapy and you work really well with the medicine, or the medicine works. They call it the medicine, works really well with you. And so, yeah, you always get a lot out of these sessions.
And I think the reason for that, like you said, I've been doing this kind of stuff for 20 years. Like I did the Institute of Healing Arts back in 2005, where I basically learned this exact same process that we did on plant medicine. I just learned how to do it without plant medicine. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that this process that I learned, this tool that I have in my toolkit, it does the same thing. Plant medicine just does it faster and you go a lot farther. So I came out of a night of plant medicine feeling like I had done light years of therapy.
They say it's like 20 years of therapy in a week or something.
Yeah. And so it's like, you do come out of that week sort of like, whoa, what just happened? You feel amazing. Everyone's like, you get into the week and you're not
spiritual Red Bull.
Yeah. Yeah. Like everyone's like, we're going to be best friends forever. It's like going to youth camp when you're, and, there's definitely like a spiritual high that everyone leaves.
You're not high, but there's definitely some energy flowing.
Well, you do have DMT still in your system. So we really wanted to be honest with the telling of our story because this was one of the things that like catapulted our recovery forward, and because it kept me from being stuck. As we've shared in previous episodes, recovering from betrayal trauma, the statistics on it say it takes 3 to 5 years. What are we, 2.5 years into recovery? Still being totally honest and transparent, it hasn't been a perfect journey from that point forward. It's not like we went to Rhythmia and we're like, we're healed. We're never gonna.
No way.
No. And in fact, one of the ways I've heard infidelity or betrayal referred to in a marriage is like cancer. Like no one ever says I was cured of cancer. What do they say?
I'm in remission.
I'm in remission.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's one of the ways that I've heard infidelity and betrayal talked about is like, you're never cured, you're in remission. And I would say that's probably a good description, and kind of even the things that we've been through in the last year of recognizing that, okay, we made it pretty far in our healing. And this was one of the things that, like I said, catapulted or accelerated that healing. But we're now into different and new layers of healing a marriage. And there are still things that come up that we realize like, okay, now we've got that big thing out of the way. And now we're dealing with like other relationship styles and childhood traumas and ways of being that we're like, okay, now we have to do this other deep, hard work. And I know people want to say, well, if your relationship is that much work, then you're in the wrong relationship. Like relationships shouldn't be hard. What do you think about that, Josh?
Well, I mean, Hollywood tells us that story possibly. I think relationships are messy. Most people are going to agree with that. We all wish that we came to the relationship more whole, more complete, more having done more therapy, having less baggage and things like that, having made better decisions before we got to that point, and that, don't affect decisions that we make during the marriage. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true.
Yeah. I think a lot of people just want to say, oh, relationships should be easy. And if it's not easy, then it's not the right relationship. And like you said, I think relationships are messy and complicated, and we all have our brokenness. Everyone has experienced trauma. You look like you want to say something.
Yeah. Well, we may. I just think it comes down to, it's really seems to be as simple as just how we decided we're going to treat the person that we have decided to marry, right? Like, they have, they're going to bring their issues, and we have to just decide how we're going to work through all that. And I think society doesn't necessarily prepare us for those potential issues and things to work through. There are resources like Pure Desire and many other resources before you get to that point. Hopefully, if you're listening to this before you get to that point, that can help you to correct issues, correct course correct before you get to those kind of very rough places.
We were listening to something just last night that was talking about our tendency to, if we're wounded, whether it's in life or in relationships, it could be a job, it could be your marriage, it could be a friendship, it could be your, anything where you suddenly get attacked, criticized, shamed, whatever it may be. And our tendency as humans is to retreat. Like, I'm wounded. And so I'm going to pull back into my cave of isolation and not put myself out there again because I don't want to feel this pain again. And the counterintuitive thing, after you've kind of taken some time is to go back out and expand again and to reach back into relationship, to try again, to still live big, if that makes sense. Like, instead of retreating and becoming smaller and smaller, the challenge is to forgive. The challenge is to ask for forgiveness. The challenge is to
also surround yourself with people that are going to help you do that. Because there's plenty of people out there that are going to help you to retract, right? And side with this or that. But there's not a lot of people that are going to help you to expand, to forgive. Most people don't want to go that route. They want to be very,
Yeah. And I think one of the hard things about relationships and about marriage specifically, but I mean, I can think of, this is hard with friends. This is hard with parents and children. I can think of so many parents and children that are ostracized right now, like adult children who don't have relationships with their parents, because both parties have to be willing to lay down the swords. Both parties have to be willing to forgive and forgive each other, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, both people have to forgive. Both people have to try a new way of interacting with one another and showing love. And so anyway, I think that's one of the great challenges of our time. And I think maybe this is one of the reasons why hopefully our podcast is helping someone out there, is not just how it's, what we're trying to model through our marriage and continuing to pick up again after we've been hurt and continuing to turn towards one another. Maybe there's a parent and child out there who need this kind of hope for reconciliation in their own lives and in their relationship. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we talked about with plant medicine is the fascinating research that has been done that shows how it rewires the brain. So we mentioned ayahuasca, which is one of those, psilocybin, which is also known as magic mushrooms, but the scientific name is psilocybin. But there's other things like LSD and MDMA and ketamine. Depending on where you live in the world, depending on where you live in the United States, these things are legal in some places and not in others. One of the things that Josh and I would like to emphasize is, like we said with ayahuasca, the importance of doing it in the right setting. Wherever you may be, if you are interested in this and you're doing the research, please make sure that you find a licensed professional to help you. There are licensed facilitators in some states, and like ketamine is a widely available treatment. That's something that is legal here in Utah. So do your research if you're interested, but there are other things that have been shown to rewire the brain. Like, for example, breath work that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast. And we'll probably take some time on a future podcast to talk about other things that rewire the brain. But Josh, you had mentioned one.
Prayer. Who would have thought? Prayer is a great one. And in Romans 12:2, right, it talked about renewing our minds,
changing the ways we think and act.
And it's really not just behavior modification. It is really just literally changing the way we are through prayer, constant daily prayer. But I was also going to touch on, there's mixed results on this. So Avonlea got a lot out of arrhythmia. I did not get so
That's
much
true.
out of arrhythmia. I would not go back necessarily. We haven't been back. But I have tried it. I have given it a lot of effort. And I've done this psilocybin twice too. I'm just like, this is not for me. So,
well, first you found psilocybin to be gentler and more effective for you. And so that's one thing that I think is also interesting is I don't believe this is for everyone. And certain medicines might interact with one person better than another. And so this is part of the reason why we are hesitant and reluctant to talk about it, because there is so much unknown about this.
Yeah. And it's hard, very hard work. So don't go thinking, oh, arrhythmia is going to, it's just going to, no way. Arrhythmia, if you want the flu for 4 or 5 days straight, that's what you're in for. It is very hard, and you're going to be up most of the time. You're going to be in class. You're going to be doing the ceremonies. It is hard, very hard work. It is not relaxing in the spa and,
Well, there is some of that.
There's a little bit of it, but not a lot. Yeah. It's hard work.
You make it sound like it's not enjoyable. It's enjoyable hard work.
Yes. It was enjoyable hard work. A lot of memories for sure, right? But yeah, I was just going to say also that while this is a medical facility, while it has all the protocols it does and, the staff and the structure around it, my caution to Christians out there is that we still have to be aware of what's going on. It is not an occult practice, I would say, but they are calling in. You are working with a shaman that's a head shaman. There's plenty of medicine providers around the column that are always there to help you, and they're amazing, and they're always saying, God bless you, and stuff like that. They have that kind of feel and spirituality around it. God bless you, brother. God bless you, sister, and stuff like that. But one thing to know, it is not the God that we believe in necessarily. It is not Christ, right? Some may say they're Christian or Catholic, but it is not. They very much do invoke ancestor spirits and stuff like that. So that is very against what we believe as Christians. And that's what when I got there, I was like, what did we just get into? So very scared. I was very much in prayer that God and the Holy Spirit did not let me see or get into anything that I wasn't supposed to. So I was kind of adverse in fighting this, where Avonlea was just like,
Well, I was also devoutly praying about that and asking God to protect us through this experience and to prevent it if there needed to be some reason like delay our plane or have, I was like, God, put a shield around us if this is not meant for us.
Yeah, I think we just slightly have different outlooks on this. For me, I'd rather just stay I would rather stay not healed, wounded, whatever, continue on with the problem throughout life rather than be healed and maybe be exposed to things I'm not supposed to spiritually, right?
Sure.
And so that was just my fear. And that's just a word of caution when you're doing any of this stuff. I did, psilocybin's different if you're doing that. It's a facilitator. There's no praying. You can do your own prayers, but there's no setting the scene, in ayahuasca, in these ceremonies, there's very much set and setting. There's a whole ceremony that goes into preparation and stuff like this around this. Or psilocybin is much different. You're in a room, it's private, you have a facilitator there and stuff like that.
Yeah. One of the things I think actually would be beneficial for our follow-up episode to this would be to talk about intention, set and setting, pharmakia. I think that's where a lot of the fear comes from around plant medicine because of the way it's talked about in scripture in the Bible, like what is pharmakia? And I've actually done a lot of research on that since then, and I think it would be helpful. But that's your point is, this is why you and I have still been a little hesitant and reluctant to share this story, because there are scientific unknowns, there are spiritual unknowns. And the answer is we just don't know. And so, we would rather, Josh is saying, we would rather err on the side of caution and not get mixed up with sorcery or witchcraft or,
Yeah, it's tough because we met so many people that have been healed through all kinds of addictions. We've met people that have been healed through from 5 addictions going back, 5 times, It's tough because it is working for
the results are very promising.
They are, and it's working for a lot of people. But we would just be cautious because it might not come without without a chain attached to it or something spiritually compromising.
So there's the kind of laying it out there, the truth of like the legitimate concerns, but also a lot of hope, a lot of promise. I have, like I said, I've been studying this really intensely for several months, and there's a lot of really fascinating research out there on this being able to treat people with PTSD and treatment-resistant depression who have nothing else has worked. And yet like psilocybin, for example, has really helped them manage life. And
that is actually that is another interesting thing about plant medicine that we learned, is that they really do talk about the spiritual side of physical ailments and mental health and things like that. In Western medicine, we'll just throw medicine at you, just throw medicine for mental health, depression and stuff like that. We just throw pills, and we don't, even as Christians, don't think,
is there a spiritual?
We just take the medicine. We'll take the medicine for pain. We'll take the medicine for mental health. We'll take it for any reason. And we don't stop to think, is there a spiritual reason that I have this ailment? Mm-hmm. And it's very much Western, kind of medicine and spirituality. We've gotten caught up even as Christians in this and
Absolutely.
Not looking at the spiritual, probably underlining component to this, the sin, most likely, And there are more, the Catholic Church has done a pretty good job of pointing that out. The Orthodox Church has done a good job of pointing out that the underlying spiritual realities of our physical ailments. That's one thing that we kind of learned down in Arrhythmia too, is that it's not just it's not just, you can't just treat the surface level, what you're seeing, the
symptom.
The symptom, yes, exactly. We can't just treat the symptom. You have to treat what's really the underlying causes.
Yeah. And a couple of books that I've read recently, finally, I don't know why it took me so many years, but I finally read The Body Keeps the Score, which is a book on trauma. So that also talks about different ways of treating trauma. Mm-hmm. And an exciting, another rewiring the brain possibility would be something called neurofeedback. So you can Google that if you're interested. But to your point, The Body Keeps the Score. The whole point is that these traumas have to go somewhere and they end up getting stored in our tissues. Same thing. I'm rereading a book called The Autoimmune Cure, and it's a book on how most women with autoimmune diseases have some sort of trauma that is probably impacting this autoimmune disease. And so when you talk about illnesses having a spiritual component, I would say trauma is a spiritual component, and what are we doing to heal that? Anyway, I feel like that's a good place to wrap up this episode, and we can kind of keep the story rolling. Next time, we can talk a little bit about different things that rewire the brain. We can talk about pharmakia, and then we'll just continue talking about how the journey of healing progressed after Rhythmia.
Yeah, and I just want to leave everyone with this last idea. We've been talking about medicine, and we talk about the plant medicine, but I was just listening to a kind of YouTube video of a priest in the Orthodox Church who was saying that one of the best medicine is prayer. And so if you're struggling with this and think, I just need to get down to Rhythmia, but you can't afford it or don't want to because it's spiritually compromising, possibly, the best medicine is prayer. And I would turn to that. Thank you very much. We enjoyed having you guys, and we'll see you next time. That's all we've got for this episode of the Love After Lies podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other potential new listeners is for you to rate the show and leave a comment on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you tune in to listen.
Also, make sure to link up with us at loveafterlies.com and on social. Join us next week as we continue on an adventure of heartbreak and healing. And until then, remember, transformation starts with truth.